Number 10. 2 Fredbears. Some believe that Golden Freddy is one Fredbear, whereas Nightmare is another Fredbear. The theory also suggests that both of these animatronics have ties to or were once a version of Fredbear. So both in a sense are Fredbear while also being separate from him. They are all collectively Fredbears, but also their own entity. The question remains, of course, if there are 2 Fredbears, have they always both existed, or was only one of them the original Fredbear? It is possible that although we have only ever seen one Fredbear on the screen at a time, there could be multiple Fredbears out there who each evolved to become something different, with one of them becoming known as Golden Freddy and the other becoming known as the more ghostly version Yellow Bear, who then perhaps goes on to become Nightmare. Number 9. Many Fredbears. It has been theorized that there is more than one Spring Bonnie suit. Some fans believe the original suit was actually locked away or destroyed, whereas the other suit that would go on to become Springtrap in William Afton's prison was actually his own personal suit. Then again, we also have seen what appears to be a slightly different version of a bunny costume, which could also be a version of Spring Bonnie in the Help Wanted game, which is worn by the entity we know as Glitchtrap. If there are multiple Spring Bonnies, it seems more than likely that there are multiple Fredbear animatronics out there, or even potentially Springlock suit versions of Fredbear. I'm not sure if Fredbear is a Springlock or not, but could be. If so, that would play well into the previous theory of there being multiple versions of Fredbear who evolved to be different entities and potentially even different Golden Freddys. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Fredbear and all of the possible theories out there as to who Fredbear could be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. The star of the show. What if Fredbear isn't Golden Freddy but another famous bear that we all know very well? That's right, what if Fredbear is actually Freddy Fazbear? I know that these two bears look very different, I know, but it could be possible that Golden Freddy is a completely separate animatronic and instead Freddy is the one who was once Fredbear. The evidence we have for this is the commonality between the two characters. Fredbear was the star and title character of Fredbear's Diner. Freddy Fazbear is the star and title character of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Could it then be possible that Fredbear was actually transformed or remodeled into something completely new, or something sort of new? Instead of being tossed away or relegated to the shadows, what if Fredbear was given a new look and new name as time went on and instead became Freddy Fazbear? Number 7. Fredbear is Fredbear. Even more terrifying would be the theory that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are actually separate entities, same with Freddy and Fredbear, and that Fredbear is actually a completely unique animatronic. Now, why would this be so scary? Well, it would mean so many of us were wrong in our theories, especially the theories about Fredbear being Golden Freddy. It would also mean that there are even more animatronics potentially roaming around out there. That is assuming that Fredbear is still active. If Fredbear was active though, that is one more animatronic to worry about, one more anthropomorphic bear animatronic too. Does that make it more scary? I don't know, but bears in the wild are certainly scary to run into, so perhaps bear animatronics are also more vicious and terrifying by comparison. I know not too many people are afraid of Freddy out there in the world, but I'm just saying, bears are pretty scary creatures. You do not want to fight a bear. Number 6. Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy is a much more popular character than Fredbear when it comes to the fan base, and perhaps that is why the community has tried to give Fredbear more meaning by tying them more closely to Golden Freddy. The evidence cited for these two being one and the same ultimately comes down to appearances. Golden Freddy appears to look similar to Fredbear, and the animatronic is in a state of disrepair, which many think could be because Fredbear is such an old animatronic. Fredbear is also thought of as a yellow bear ultimately, and so is Golden Freddy. In fact, Golden Freddy in the first game has the file name Yellow Bear, so while it's not anything super concrete, a color is a color, and that's a fact. Number 5. Cassidy. There are so many theories when it comes to who exactly possesses Golden Freddy, whom some believe to be Fredbear. One such theory is that Cassidy is the one who possesses the lesser seen animatronic. Cassidy is a bit of a confusing character, but is ultimately one of the people, if not the only person, that fans theorize is possessing Golden Freddy. At least if we're talking about the games. Once you include the books, it gets a heck of a lot more complicated, because in the books there are other characters associated with Golden Freddy, and kind of multiple characters too, if we're talking about Fazbear Frights and then the novel trilogy as well. Number 4. Destroyed. What if Fredbear isn't anyone because the animatronic actually doesn't even exist anymore? At least, not in a physical sense. Many people theorize after Fredbear's role in the Bite of 83 that the animatronic was completely scrapped and destroyed. If that were to be true, it opens up a whole other realm of spooky possibilities. What if Fredbear wasn't repurposed or didn't evolve to become a new entity but is simply a ghost? This would help to explain some other mysterious things that we know about Fredbear. Or I suppose possibly Golden Freddy. After all, what if Golden Freddy was still Fredbear in disrepair and then later Fredbear after death? What if that's what Golden Freddy is? Number 3. Teleportation. Let's say that Fredbear is Golden Freddy. In that case, this would mean that either in death or possibly also just in life, if the animatronic is still considered to exist and not be a ghost, that Fredbear can teleport. At least that would be true if 1. You believe that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are one in the same, and 2. If you believe that Golden Freddy could teleport. Based on the fact that Golden Freddy is kind of a bonus animatronic in the first game who doesn't so much move into the office as simply randomly appear there, and also in FNAF 2 kind of also randomly appears places, many believe that Golden Freddy is actually capable of teleportation. Now, is this a ghost skill though, or is it something that has always been built into the suit? Well, based on FNAF 2, I think we would assume it was the suit. If it was always around, that means these suits in general are capable of being a lot more deadly and terrifying than we could have ever imagined. Talk about state of the art. Number 2. The flesh remains. Some believe that Crying Child, and not Cassidy, possesses Golden Freddy and thereby Fredbear. However, it's also possible that the two could share the animatronic, or that Fredbear is possessed by Cece whereas Golden Freddy is possessed by Cassidy alone. Crying Child, however, is intrinsically linked to Fredbear due to the Bite of 83. Crying Child is very much believed to be the victim of that bite, and it was Fredbear who of course did the biting. We see this take place in a cutscene featured in FNAF 4. While Crying Child doesn't seem to have been stuffed into the animatronic suit like other victims, at least from what we know. I don't think Cece ever ends up stuffed in that suit unless we've never seen that before. Part of their brain was, however, lost in the bite, which would mean that there was some flesh left behind to imbue the suit with their spirit. Of course, would that be enough flesh to imbue with the spirit? That's a topic for debate. Number 1. Nightmare. Regardless of whether or not you believe there are multiple Golden Freddys or multiple Fredbears, which are perhaps all Golden Freddys, it seems very likely that Fredbear is Nightmare, or that Nightmare is meant to represent Fredbear. If the Nightmare animatronics are more manifestations of fear and not real physical animatronics. If FNAF 4 is all about Crying Child, like many believe, who is critically injured by Fredbear and later dies of his injuries, then it makes sense that one of the scariest animatronics in the games, Nightmare, is meant to represent Fredbear. Ergo, these animatronics become one and the same.
And at 10, Dismantled Fredbear. Dismantled Fredbear is an antagonist in the main attraction in the FNAF fan game Fredbear's Fright. Dismantled Fredbear appears to be a slightly withered version of Fredbear from, the main FNAF games, except not Nightmare Fredbear, normal Fredbear. Fredbear's appearance is also slightly similar to that of Dismantled Spring Bonnie from that game as well, although with a purple hat and tie and a darker brown coloration for his suit. Due to being a Springlock character, he also has 5 fingers on each hand, but only has 4 toes on each foot. But I mean, I guess animatronic feet are bigger than human feet. His right eye is also broken and hangs open, and the suit covering his extremities seems to have scattered holes. There are also presumably blood stains on his teeth, and that's probably because of the Bite of 83 that we see take place in FNAF 4, which presumably causes the Springlock suits to get discontinued and then deemed unfit for employees. This thing, while not horribly destroyed, is still off-putting. And at 9, Shadow Fredbear. Shadow Fredbear is one of the 2 primary antagonists in Final Nights 2 Sins of the Father. Shadow Fredbear is almost perfectly intact, only burnt black in color. He has a few rips on his body though, and is missing his left hand. The area around his mouth also appears to be torn slightly as well, revealing a majority of his endoskeleton teeth. His teeth and eyes also glow, which makes him easier to see. Imagine though, if this animatronic had actual gums. Like, if he did, that would probably be the scariest thing that you could ever see. Like, the absolute monstrosity that would have been created just by giving Shadow Freddy gums is horrifying. My genius is sometimes petrifying. But nonetheless, this is still creepy without the gums. Especially because this dude is so powerful that he replaces most of the other animatronics on night 5 of Final Nights 2. But if you saw the whole Final Nights list, you already know all about Shadow Freddy. Link's up there. Click it. I hope it's that corner. And at 8, Fixed Nightmare Fredbear. Fixed Nightmare Fredbear is something that I never wanted to see. For some reason, he reminds me of my uncle if he was a yellow animatronic robot bear, but it's not like in an insulting way. Like, I'm not saying like he's big or anything. I can't really put my finger on why. He just reminds me of him. It's fine, he's rich. Anyway, Repaired Nightmare Fredbear is just what you'd expect, unless it's the one that just is covered in band-aids and paper to fix his eyes and teeth. That one's actually pretty funny. However, it had to be Fixed Nightmare Fredbear because Fixed Fredbear is just a slightly darker Golden Freddy. I don't really know what it is about these repaired animatronics that makes them so creepy. Maybe it's the fact that they're just more realistic, or that it could in theory actually exist. I mean, if you're going by the many worlds theory, there is already a world where FNAF is real, and there is a world where each FNAF fan game is real. I mean, there is a world where I am personally fighting William Afton. Yet there is also a world where I am William Afton. None of them are this world though. Yet I still find these repaired animatronics to just be wrong. And at 7, Fred Trap. To be honest, I searched this up just for the hell of it, and there are actually Fredbear versions of Springtrap. Fred Trap is exactly what you'd expect. Springtrap's look on a yellow Freddy animatronic. The designs are actually really well made, and honestly are scarier than normal Springtrap to me. I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how scared Scott himself was of Bonnie, but that could just be idle speculation. There are also even more rundown versions and even scrap versions of Fred Trap, which are already haunting when you don't think about the fact that it would still be William inside the suit, being kept alive by the spirit of a dead kid. And not even the first one. But whatever. Fred Trap is definitely one of the more unique versions of Fredbear I saw for this list, and I'm pretty damn impressed. And at 6, Realistic Fredbear. Now, looking up Realistic Fredbear will not yield this result on Google Images. This was found using the keyword Stylized Fredbear, but after looking at this bear in the Big Blue House wannabe, I felt Realistic Fredbear was the best name for it. Created as a commission by DeviantArt user Trike Vinang Studio, this perfectly describes my worst nightmare come to life. No joke, I had a dream where I was on a date with this girl, and I go to take a shower, but when I'm done, I get dressed and ask her what head I should wear, and reveal to her, and I guess myself, that I am part animatronic. No joke, that's actually a dream I had. This is what this channel has done to me. This is what you have done to me. None of you clicked on that Minecraft video, okay? Every FNAF video keeps doing well, so I have to keep making them. This is what you're doing to me. Do you not understand? And this thing just feels like it would be in that world. This furry animatronic is absolutely terrifying in the worst of ways. Like, not even like so terrifying that it's good. Like, please, for the love of God, don't make this a real animatronic or I will puke. Halfway through and at number 5, Scrap Fredbear. Scrap Fredbear is probably the most unique design for a scrap animatronic that I've seen. Most other scrap animatronics have Scrap Baby's claw as a main feature. However, this one is incredibly horrific in the best way. One has a buzzsaw for a hand, which is very badass, but the others have severe withering on the legs and around the stomach, and they all include that signature stomach mouth, of course, since Nightmare Fredbear is the scariest nightmare animatronic, aside from the one just literally called Nightmare, which is just an inverted Nightmare Fredbear anyway. The big withered left hand and the stars coming off of him just make him look more menacing. Like if Nightmare Fredbear was an elementary school teacher who just loved giving out gold stars, but then was corrupted by whatever these incredibly underprepared kids are gonna have to deal with in the horror movie. Like, I came out of high school not knowing anything about actual life, but you expect a group of 5 kids to take down some horrific otherworldly being. Like, who are they, Phineas and Ferb? And at 4, Demented Fredbear. Now, it could be my search history, however, when looking up the word Demented on Google Images, the first thing Google recommended to me was Demented Fredbear. And looking at it, I can see why. Demented Fredbear is what Nightmare Fredbear should have been in my opinion. The exterior isn't as torn on the torso, and instead keeping the tearing mostly at the joints and extremities, and overall, the appearance just seems more aggressive and bloodthirsty. Some iterations of this character even have tongues coming out of both mouths. You know, the mouth on his face as well as the famous stomach mouth that makes us think that Crying Child saw Elizabeth get scooped. Yeah, they have tongues now. Demented Fredbear's nails are also extremely long and very sharp, easily being able to tear through flesh or dig back down to the pits of hell from which it came. This is actually so well made that I moved it up from its original position. It was at number 6, but I feel like number 3 is more realistic, even if it's not at number 3 now, it's at number 4. It was at number 6, but I feel like number 4 is more realistic, even if realistic Fredbear was pretty damn horrifying, but for a completely different reason. And at 3, Sinister Fredbear. Ah yes, the Funtime Freddy list was missing a Sinister animatronic, but here we are with Sinister Fredbear. Had the game released, Sinister Fredbear would have been one of the most terrifying Sinister animatronics in the game. I don't know what makes this character so terrifying, but nevertheless, holy sweet niblets Miley Ray Stewart, is this thing gonna give you a scare. While there really is only 1 or 2 pictures of Sinister Fredbear because, you know, the game didn't actually release, you can already get a sense of how terrifying this animatronic would have been. With the classic Sinister teeth, which at this point are basically signature, and the more toy-like appearance to his casing, this guy would have made the game unplayable for me. I already try to avoid the Nightmare Fredbear level in FNAF VR because I don't want to deal with him. I mean, like, I don't play much FNAF VR, but when I do, I stick to Pirate Ride because I don't want to deal with Nightmare Fredbear, so Sinister Fredbear would have just been a deal breaker. I didn't even know he was meant to be in the game. I would have seen it and just turned it off. I wouldn't even have played it, let's be honest. Penultimately, in at number 2, Twisted Fredbear. Twisted Fredbear has to be one of the worst creations known to man. Not in an it's so bad it's scary kind of way, but in an oh my god, what twisted mind could have created this unholy monster from the deepest pits of hell kind of way. Twisted Fredbear takes everything that makes the twisted animatronic scary and adds him to Nightmare Fredbear. From boils all over to extra sharp teeth and claws, some even have a tongue coming out of the stomach mouth, but like an actual tongue, not like the other one. Like if it was a human tongue coming out of the stomach mouth, which is just wrong on so many levels. Some people also made the joints teeth, which is just a whole other can of worms that I'm not even gonna get into. And these all just make me want to crawl into a hole and die. Like, I'm horrified by the amount of creativity, I'll say, to come out of the FNAF community. Like, we need like a community pot for money for therapy or something, because clearly a lot of us could use it. Like, not in a bad way though, but clearly there are some repressed issues that are coming to light. Finally, in at number 1, Slasher Fredbear. Slasher Fredbear by DeviantArt user PlayStation Jedi is an unholy abomination that must be stopped. I've talked about the Slasher animatronics before, particularly in the Bonnie alternate versions list. However, Slasher Fredbear is so much worse. He may not have a shotgun axe guitar, but oh my god. Let me read the description of this animatronic in the words of PlayStation Jedi himself. Ahem. Quote, the largest and strongest of all slasher animatronics, Slasher Fredbear is an unstoppable force with enhanced strength and durability. Fredbear is capable of smashing through walls, withstanding lots of punishment, and grabbing heavy objects and throwing them across the room. While Fredbear uses his great strength to pick up and rip people in half, if he needs a quick kill, he can extend a blade mounted to his wrist to cut through people like butter. Or if he needs a ranged attack, he can use his 2 wrist-mounted LMG guns. Fredbear can switch between these weapons on the fly, either using 2 LMGs or 2 blades on each wrist. What the actual LMG, by the way, stands for light machine gun. Jesus ever-loving Christ, this is going to make me cry myself to sleep. Not to mention the spikes covering his body, or the incredible amount of blood that is just soaking into him, covering him from head to toe. This dude has light machine guns on his wrists. Ah! And at 10, Lonely. This is pretty much confirmed to be incorrect at this point, but still kinda terrifying if you think about it. The theory that Fredbear plushies that follow you around in the 8-bit minigames of FNAF 4 being Lonely Freddy is damn creepy. At least if we assume that Lonely Freddy would be trying to take over Crying Child's body. If you didn't know, the Lonely Freddy dolls were introduced in the Fazbear Fright story called Lonely Freddy, where it steals the main character Alex's body, leaving his consciousness trapped inside the robot. It's entirely possible that it wasn't trying to do so to Crying Child, and that instead William created the Lonely Freddy to keep an eye on him, and took the whole wanna steal your body part out of the code. So the fact that this is a camera could confirm this theory as false, but the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. However, the presence of a plush in the sister location camera office, and it being a plush not a robot, is certainly damning to this theory. And at 9, one and the same. One theory I've seen plenty of times, and I'm pretty sure was mostly around the start of FNAF 4, was that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same animatronic, suggesting that the reason Golden Freddy is all limp in the original FNAF and FNAF 2 is because his endoskeleton was removed after the crying child's bite in 1983, and that's why the suit has to teleport around and cause hallucinations, because it can't physically move. This would also probably mean that crying child was the one in the Golden Freddy suit. However, we know this isn't true based on characters being separate in Ultimate Custom Night, so they are two different characters, Fredbear and Golden Freddy, and just coloring and size in general, since Golden Freddy is much smaller than Fredbear would be, since Fredbear would also have to accommodate a human and Golden Freddy wouldn't, since Golden Freddy is just an animatronic and not a springlock suit like Fredbear. At least we think he's a springlock suit, I'm pretty sure. And at 8, Death. Nightmare from FNAF 4 is in essence an inverted color scheme Fredbear. He serves as the game's primary or ultimate antagonist, and this theory goes that Nightmare is symbolic of death, since death is after all the ultimate fight for crying child, as he lay on his hospital bed, fighting for his life. Nightmare's design also features a visible brain, which you can see through his translucent head, which could also be symbolic of brain death, which we know is possible since the game is actively using crying child's brain, so it's possible that he could then be brain dead. In Ultimate Custom Night, we are also told by Nightmare that he is William's wickedness made of flesh, which only further enhances this theory, since it was William's creation that ultimately caused the crying child to get injured, and William is the one who pulls the plug on crying child after promising him that he will put him back together, whatever that means. It could also just be that crying child's brain is slowly getting less and less oxygen, causing his hallucinations to become stronger as he slowly dies. And it's 7 generations. The Fredbear animatronic may have had multiple variations over the years, according to one theory posted by a deleted account on the FNAF subreddit. This theory proposed that there are in fact 3 different Fredbear animatronics that we've seen throughout the games. The first one being the one from FNAF 4 in Fredbear's Family Diner in 1983, another being the Golden Freddy animatronics from FNAF 1 and 2, and the third being Yendo from Sister Location. Yendo was always a strange animatronic. Some thought of him as Funtime Freddy's golden version, others thought it was a confirmation of the Foxy X Freddy Oh, sorry, I meant ship. Others thought that it was just another bear animatronic that was never finished. This idea proposed that in fact it was meant to be the sister location Fredbear that was cancelled after Circus Babies closed. It is after all an incomplete animatronic, lacking casing over most of its body, only having facial features, so it could very well be an incomplete Funtime Fredbear. Since William did lose his son to the animatronic, it is possible that he also just couldn't bring himself to completing it. In its 6th, Stomach Mouth. The stomach mouths present on the Nightmare animatronics have been a matter of guesswork since FNAF 4's release. The stomach mouth is most visible on Fredbear and Nightmare since it appears to be the main feature of the two. However, the only explanation that we have for this feature that makes sense is that crying child witnessed his sister get scooped by Baby, which as far as we know is the only animatronic to capture someone by opening up their stomach. It would also make sense given that she is his sister and he would probably be around her at the grand opening to Circus Baby's Pizza World. They probably went to get ice cream together, or maybe he was trying to warn her saying that dad told us to stay away from Baby, but watching his sister get scooped would also explain the complicated relationship he has with these animatronics. He obviously loves them since he has all the plushies, but seeing his sister get scooped would definitely make him weary of animatronics in the future. I would definitely be terrified. I mean, I would also get my kicked because I let my sister get killed by an animatronic, but like, yeah. Halfway through and at number 5, Mommy. This is a bonkers theory that I'm certain isn't true, but it's still fun to talk about it anyway. You don't really have to believe every theory that you talk about. One Amino Apps user suggests that perhaps the psychic friend Fredbear plush isn't William's camera, but instead is possessed by their mother. It could actually make sense if the plush was in the room when the mother died, whether William killed her or it was like a family car accident, the plush could be there, and since it's their child's favorite toy, the mother could also gravitate towards it. It would also explain why William would keep it in the office like we see in Sister Location, keeping it next to the cameras he was using to watch over his son in an attempt to keep him safe. He wouldn't want to get rid of it because it contains the soul of his former love. He would also keep it deep underground where memories sleep, to keep her close to her daughter, and another reason why he would send Michael down there in the first place, to see his sister and his mother. In at 4, Nightmare. While Nightmare is most likely meant to represent death, there are some other possibilities as well. Like, for example, that Nightmare is in fact Shadow Nightmare Fredbear. Since, after all, the character is in essence a shadow, being dark in color and translucent like a shadow would be. It also relates to another theory that Crying Child is in fact Shadow Freddy from FNAF 2, meaning it could be the representation of what Crying Child would become after he caught him, or after just dying in general after being taken off life support, as we see at the end of the game. Or that Nightmare is meant to be the shadow of Nightmare Freddy instead of Nightmare Fredbear, since the shadow animatronics always seem to have more of a sinister appearance. Perhaps Nightmare is in fact Fredbear, and this is just a representation of what Crying Child had to deal with in the 8-bit minigames, playing out in his head as his body tries to understand his current situation. Like how they say your life flashes before your eyes the moments before you die, except it's playing out in a horrific form due to his situation and, you know, his fear of the animatronics. Getting close to the end in at number 3, impossible. Actually, could this have even happened at all? Could Fredbear have crushed Crying Child's skull? It's a question that many have asked, and one that I've brought up on this channel as well. I seem to think that it shouldn't have been, assuming this was a regular animatronic and not a high-powered skull-crushing machine, since it would take an insane amount of force, way higher than a normal animatronic would be able to generate to even crack the skull, not to mention crush it, as we are meant to believe this whole thing plays out. To cause that kind of damage, the animatronic would require pneumatic actuators that are industry-grade and huge. They would take up way more space than any animatronic could reasonably fit inside, especially at that scale. Even if it was under the stage, we're meant to believe that these are spring-lock suits that can change between suit and animatronic, and there is no way, if they were using those, anyone would be able to get in the suit, let alone be willing to. Seems pretty far-fetched to me, even for this series. Penultimately, in at number 2, Survivor. This may be a slight deviation, but what if Crying Child was going to survive? Like I just said, it's highly unlikely that Crying Child sustained real severe damage due to his head being crushed by this animatronic. However, if he still managed to wind up in the hospital, are we sure he wasn't going to make it out? Obviously, they would only suggest taking him off life support if they didn't think he'd recover, but it's possible that he still would. And we see Crying Child actively fighting to stay alive inside of his mind over the course of the 5 nights. And if Nightmare, our final boss, is meant to represent death, the thing we want to avoid, and we beat him, could we have made a recovery? We don't know, because we still die, because William pulls the plug on us, making us think that no matter how much it pained him, maybe he needed us gone. Maybe we saw something, like our sister getting scooped, or maybe we asked too many questions. But if we could survive Nightmare, maybe we could have survived death. Maybe we could have been spared. Maybe we could have been saved. Finally, in at number 1, Crying Child. Then there is the final theory that Crying Child himself goes on to possess Fredbear, meaning that Fredbear goes on to become Golden Freddy, and that Crying Child and Cassidy decide to share a vessel in the form of Golden Freddy and work together to stop William. But how would this be possible? Because of Remnant. Remnant is the combination of metal and the intense agony felt while being murdered or killed. This agony, as we learn in Fazbear Frights, is so powerful that it can stretch out from beyond our bodies and grab hold of objects. This is how the FNAF animatronics become possessed. This is also how Crying Child would have possessed Fredbear, since I'm guessing having your skull crushed is a pretty agonizing way to go out. And that's coming from me, someone who enjoys the suffering of others. Because even if they are young, the children who run up and down my hall make my dog upset, and my dog is basically my fur child, so I must protect him. Unfortunately, I don't have an animatronic or enough money to pay rent for my sister while I'm in prison, so guess I'm staying out here for now. Guess I, unfortunately, don't deal. In at 10, Human Nightmare Fredbear. Human versions of animatronics always set me on edge. I always get worried whenever I type this in because of what I've seen. I'm gonna start getting weird ads, which is why I always look these up using the Top 10 Gaming account. I've seen some scary man. Reddit can be a scary place. Aside from all the horrific things I've seen, Human Nightmare Fredbear is very Joker-esque in design. Some versions have the character more focused on that nightmare aesthetic, while some are more focused on the human normal Fredbear. But no matter what, it's always unsettling. Just human versions of animatronics are creepy. And based on the fact that this could in theory be possible in the FNAF universe, which you know if you watched the last video or any video where I mentioned this, but the idea that this could actually exist just sets me on edge and gives me trust issues. Whenever someone starts acting differently around me, I always get worried that they're an animatronic. And at 9, Breadbear. Breadbear is an animatronic coming from the Day Shift at Freddy series, who was created by Dave by modifying a Fredbear suit. The character appears in Day Shift at Freddy's 1, 2, and 3, and Breadbear's appearance is obviously similar to Fredbear, albeit wider. He is a golden colored bear animatronic wearing a purple top hat and bow tie with 2 black and white buttons on his chest. He has gray, metallic looking eyes, thicker arms and legs, a squarish brown nose, some smaller pupils, small white teeth, round ears with the inside insides color in lighter shades, and a very circular shaped stomach with brownish shades kind of like all strewn throughout. He has rips around his feet joints and arms. Fredbear also appears for real when Dave modifies an empty Fredbear suit and unleashes it during the sting operation on Friday, in which, depending on which route you took earlier, it either attempts to kill Jack, dies, or just destroys the pizza joint and sets itself on fire. Love that. And it ate BEARLOCK. BEARLOCK is similar to Fred Trap from the last part. In essence, it's just a FNAF what if where William was using the Spring Freddy suit to kill instead of the Spring Bonnie suit. The same ideas that were applied to Spring Trap in this case are just applied to BEARLOCK. And thank you for the comments who suggested this animatronic in the last part. Those were really useful in making this list. And like that's not the only one that was suggested, and like those comments are the reason why this list was possible. BEARLOCK was withered due to age and I'm guessing flesh because, you know, it was combined into the suit. So there are exposed sections of flesh and muscle, just a lot of gore, with some versions having more exposed than others. But they all have good old Willie A inside constantly screaming in pain because that's what he deserves. These versions, however, I feel are more gruesome than Springtrap, but probably because we don't have a limit on how far we'll take these characters, but Scott probably wanted to make it still at least somewhat family or kid friendly. It's like how speedsters with no morals don't have a limit on their speed or what they'll do. Because, you know, Flash season finale, because people still watch that show. They had a lightsaber duel. I'm mad about that. They made lightning lightsabers.
But it wasn't cool?
It was cool. It was cool, but it made me upset. And it's 7, Withered Nightmare. Oh, now there aren't many versions of Withered Nightmare, mostly because it's such an obscure thing to search. I'm honestly surprised that there was even a couple of these. Yet somehow Withered Nightmare makes Nightmare even scarier, with missing exosuit, I guess, and like the slightly transparent nature of the animatronic, plus the exposed bits and missing limbs. It always makes these characters more unsettling. But throw that onto Nightmare, the scariest animatronic in the series, and I don't want to sleep tonight. Especially with like the exposed brain and just, oh man, I don't like this. Let's move on. And at 6, Dark Nightmare Fredbear. Dark Nightmare Fredbear is an interesting character, since they aren't meant to be a shadow animatronic, like Shadow Fredbear from the last part was, but they're a purple version of the animatronic with additional withering and just a more horrific appearance. Some look like they would be Shadow Nightmare Fredbear, but Dark Nightmare Freddy is such a badass name that I love it. With glowing eyes and teeth and the nightmare aesthetic being cranked up to 11, this guy is surely going to haunt my dreams even more than FNAF already does. I'm not kidding. Last time I mentioned a dream where I was on a date and then I was part animatronic. This time, I had another dream that FNAF worked its way into. I'm not even kidding. I literally had a dream that I joined the Yogs cast. I've been dreaming a lot about that lately, but this time, while I was there, I still couldn't get away from FNAF. My TTT skin was Toy Chica. During the Jingle Jam, they made me play Five Nights VR. They even recreated a FNAF scene with a skit where the purple guy wasn't William Afton, but instead, the Bristol Pusher. If you know the Yogs cast, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I'm telling you, FNAF has invaded every aspect of my life. But honestly, I'd still be down if that's what they were gonna have me do. Yogs cast, hit me up. I can do both, right? Halfway through into number 5, Stylized Nightmare Fredbear. There are so many different versions of Stylized Nightmare Fredbear, I love it. I'm pretty sure stylized just means converting the character into your style, which makes the variety incredible to look at. From more cartoony but still horrific versions to a Frankenstein's monster looking version that will actually haunt me for the rest of my life. Like if this is what the Halloween DLC was instead of Dreadbear, I don't think I'd be as into that DLC as I am. Some of these teeth are absolute monsters within themselves. Some looking like monster animatronics from Five Nights at Candy's, some looking like it's going to crawl out of my screen just so it can kill me. Nightmare Fredbear is one of the scariest animatronics to me, and I honestly think that if I ever had to play that level in FNAF VR, I would piss myself. Like not even joking. Like that's why I don't play FNAF VR. So I don't have to deal with that level and that level only. I also think that I'd be trash at the plush baby game and I don't like being jump scared. It's horrible. Why do people like it? Like, fear is a a bad thing. I'm gonna be questioning this for the rest of my life. And at 4, Twisted Nightmare. The Twisted animatronics are probably the most horrific animatronics ever described. These buggers are disgusting and horrific, and are only approachable when using an illusion disc to make themselves look presentable. Combine that with Nightmare, who is already the scariest animatronic from the games, and oh my lord, you have one hell of a beast. And before you get mad at me, Nightmare is literally just a color scheme flipped version of Fredbear. So don't say it's a different animatronic, okay? It's not. It's the same thing, just with different colors, alright? Twisted Nightmare though is everything you want to avoid when creating something for kids. I can hardly put it into words, honestly. Like, I'm glad that there's pictures that can be shown, because I honestly don't know how to go about describing this. If the gates of hell had opened and released the entirety of the FNAF lore into real life, and then the Joy of Creation animatronics emerged, including not just the ones that were in the game, but literally every animatronic from the series in an ignited form, and then they all merged and then they became Twisted. This is how this demonic monstrosity would have been created. It's wrong, I feel deceived, and I feel physically hurt by this. And at 3, Paranormal Fredbear. Paranormal Fredbear was not what I first anticipated. I thought it was going to be closer to Nightmare, with a translucent body and a more wisp mother-like appearance, but instead Paranormal Fredbear by Taurus 4 on DeviantArt is terrifying. In essence, a Reaper Fredbear. This paranormal version is how I feel like a Reaper Fredbear would look like in the Final Night series, with endoskeleton bits holding together a melted and tearing face, and not only the face but the body as well, and the movement's just jerky enough to make you question it, but also just make you really unsettled. The long, sharp claws can easily cut through flesh, and the teeth, while not being sharp, will still set you on edge. They're nearly human, but not quite, making it horrifying to say the least. If they're actually human, that's horrifying for an entirely different reason, but this, it does it in the right way. Not to mention the paranormal spring trap that he made. Like, I may have to save that for another list, because oh boy. And at 2, Withered Nightmare Fredbear. I'm honestly surprised that I didn't include this in the last part. I actually had to triple check to make sure that I didn't. Withered Nightmare Fredbear is one of the most horrific versions of Fredbear that I've seen. The animatronic already looks pretty withered, but take away the limits of the Nightmare aesthetic, and boom, you have yourself some additional nightmare fuel, ironically. The one version even fixed the character, but still managed to make them look even more horrifying than the original. With an extended jaw, or even missing chunks of its body entirely, Withered Nightmare Fredbear makes me glad FNAF VR doesn't have mods other than the full bright mode, I think. I wonder how easy a full bright mode playthrough of the game would be. Like, yeah, it wouldn't be scary since the whole scary part of the game is the unknown, but I'm fairly certain that would make the game crazy easy. Like, maybe it's how I should play it if I ever end up doing it. Should I do a full bright mode playthrough? Yes? No? You're all sadistic, so you're definitely saying no. I don't even know why I asked. Finally, and at number 1, Hellmare. This was another animatronic that was recommended to me in the comments of the last part. The Hellmare version of Nightmare Fredbear is probably the absolute single most horrific FNAF-oriented thing I have ever seen. Like, I'm gonna have to make a whole list about the Hellmare animatronics, because this is the absolute craziest that I've ever seen. Like, how did I not know about these before? Hellmare Fredbear can only be described as a true nightmarish abomination from hell. The name is accurate. This thing has not 1, not 2, but 3 separate mouths. 2 heads, but not only does it have 2 heads, but those heads are reversed from one another. So, like, one head is on top, and then another one is on the bottom turned upside down, so it can spin its head 180 degrees and give you either Nightmare or Nightmare Fredbear. Yeah, this dude is both animatronics combined. And I didn't even see that at first. Once I noticed it, I'll admit I might have peed my pants a little, okay? No shame. It was horrifying. 2 heads, 2 sets of 4-fingered hands, it's like this, right? Like, it has 4 fingers and they're like attached together like this. Like, half of these parts are also Nightmare and not Nightmare Fredbear. Look, usually I'm not scared when I talk about these things. Like, I play it up for camera and for entertainment. I'm not playing this up. This is probably going to actually give me nightmares. The earliest one that I could see was from Molten 500 on DeviantArt, but I could be wrong. But like, if I'm not, make it stop. You need help. I will help you personally. Please.